try this again. Just had about 20 minutes worth of video I'm probably not even going to use. I just didn't like the way it turned out. We're headed to war with Iran real soon. And the perpetrators behind it don't give a shit about America. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about me. It's Benjamin Netanyahu, Benjamin Milikowski Netanyahu, Milikowski being his father's real name, who then changed it to Netanyahu to appropriate the culture of the area. Though he was Jewish, he wanted it to sound something more Middle Eastern so that he could more easily amalgamate with the area, the people. And by amalgamate, I mean by pushing people out of their homes, because he was probably amongst those people who were doing that. There was a lot of that going on during between the 1920s and the 1940s, 1950s really, where they were being pushed out. The Palestinians were being pushed out of their homes by the occupiers of Israel, the European Jews that were sent there by the British Empire, Rothschilds, and later, a little later on in that, Adolf Hitler as well, because he was pushing the Jews out of Germany because he recognized that there was a certain problem that he was having with the culture, with occupying, people taking over, and he was afraid of the Germanness, as he put it, being corrupted by this strange people. Hitler sounded an awful lot like Donald Trump when he was starting his last campaign on immigration and those kinds of things. I agree with Trump on some things. Okay, some things. If he's even in control of any of it, if he's not completely occupied and controlled by a foreign nation, which is probably the case. I highly doubt that Donald Trump has even any real power at all. He's just a figurehead to keep us all placated, just to keep us all watching the news, to keep us all watching Fox News and CNN and all that shit, to keep our brains melted so that we stay passive and keep paying our taxes like the good old goy we are. We do have a real problem with being our government being occupied by a foreign nation. Both sides, left and right, are both controlled by Israel, 100%. They all have an AIPAC handler. If you don't know what AIPAC is, go look it up. American Israel something something. I can't remember what the acronym is now, right off the top of my head. But it's the foreign lobbying group that protects Israel's interests no matter what.
AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And they didn't start out as a PAC in the sense of a political action committee, but now they have a political action committee. Ostensibly, it's a group of Americans who lobby on behalf of Israel. They're for anything Israel. And they're a very effective lobbying group.
And that's why we're going to war again in the Middle East, probably for another 20 or 30 years, spend another, $90 billion, whatever it was. It was $90 billion. $90 billion we just left over there. I don't know how much it was we spent. It was some ungodly figure of money we spent going over there, bombing and killing and a bunch of fucking goat farmers for their land. For what? And we didn't even win. We just pulled out. Just one day just decided to pull out. And then they just moved right back in again, and like that's just what happens. Like, if you're not going to stay there, it's a military force going over there. They're not going there to occupy, they're going over there to fuck shit up. And then we just did that and left, and then the people went right back into there, but with this fevering memory of, American soldiers and the American flag patch on their arm coming over there and killing their mother and the father and grandfathers and children. And, they're never going to forget that. They're never going to forget that. They're never going to forgive that, rightfully so. I mean, most of those people over there didn't want a war with America. Just like most of the people in America didn't want a war with Iraq or Afghanistan, and certainly not Iran now. We didn't want a war with Russia. We don't want a war with China. We don't want a war at all. We don't want any fucking war. Nobody does. Nobody in their right fucking mind wants a war. And in today's day and age, there's no reason for one. There just isn't. There isn't. We all have nukes now. We all have drones. We all have missiles. We all have ICBMs. Everybody's pointing the fucking ICBM at one another, and no one has the balls to pull the fucking trigger, and they never will. Hopefully. Hopefully they never will. But we still, for some reason, found some kind of reason for preemptive strikes, just in case another nation gets their hands on, nuclear weapons. Forgetting the fact that America is the only ones that have used them offensively. Let's not forget that. The Japanese people certainly won't ever forget that. Like the same, we're hearing the same rhetoric now that we heard 25 years ago from Benjamin Netanyahu, almost 25 years ago. And I might try to clip that into here. Warning of weapons of mass destruction if we didn't do something about Saddam Hussein, that he would definitely develop a nuclear weapon and be a nuclear threat.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. And there is no question that once he acquires it, history shifts immediately.
And then nothing ever came of that. There was no weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass destruction being developed, moved, bought, sold, anything.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
We went over there to fuck shit up, occupy a bunch of opium fields so we could get a bunch of people hooked on Oxycontin, steal a bunch of oil, and God only knows what other kind of war crimes we were responsible for over there. We weren't there in a defensive posture. We were there in an offensive posture. And, you can say, well, better we do it to them than they do it to us. They don't have the ability to do it to us. They don't have the ability, and they're not developing the ability. The moment that we have so many satellites in the air looking for that shit all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the moment that a spike, a ping of any kind, and you can't avoid it. You can't hide nuclear signature from the fucking satellites in the sky. You could be 30 stories down and they could still see it. There's no hiding developing nuclear weapons. There's not. So the whole idea of whatever this new regime is, it was Saddam back in the day. I don't know what the name now is. I'm sure we'll hear it soon enough. Whoever it is now, the big boogeyman who's over there in the Middle East, supposedly developing a nuclear weapon. We'll be hearing about it soon. It's not happening. It's not real. It's a boogeyman designed to fucking steal your tax dollars and to get you to be, to buy fucking country CDs that say that, you're proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. Yeah, okay. How free? Who was that guy? I can't remember what the fuck his name was now. I wish I could so I could fucking shit on him a little more. But I'm bad with names, especially fucking names that don't mean anything. They're just the fucking unreal brainwashing and gaslighting that they're doing on a massive scale to the American people. And I do mean Israel. I don't mean Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran. They never did and never will want a war with America. They never did. They get angry and saber rattle because we're responsible for a lot of war crimes over there, and they say death to America and all this shit. And I would say the same thing if a nation was coming here, fucking us up, and I was in any kind of position to have any kind of voice, I would say death to whatever nation that was. And I would pray every night that God would bring justice. And that's what they're doing. This time, though, the justice is coming for Israel. And I think we should stand aside and let it happen, lest we get swept up in that justice. We really don't want that. We've already got enough blood on our hands by signing the American name to those missiles that killed those children in Gaza. We've got enough blood on our hands now as it is. We don't need any more. Because the ghosts of Gaza have risen up from their graves, and they're coming for Israel in the form of Iran. I have no sympathies for them. You can say, well, it's not really the Israel people, it's not really the Jews, it's the Zionists and the IDF. And here's the problem with that theory, though. Here's the problem with that idea. Israel is 80 years old as a nation, established nation. They've only been around for 80 years. That means that some of the people that pushed Palestinians out into the street to die in the desert 80 years ago are still living there. Their children are definitely still living there. Their grandchildren are for sure living there. They are a First Nation warmonger. They are the ones that caused it. The people that are still living there are the ones who have caused the problem. There's a lot of other nations that are much older who the people that are living there now can't be blamed for what their ancestors did. You cannot blame ancestors. You cannot blame the children of ancient ancestors. And what I mean ancient, I mean any more than a couple of 100 years. Really less than that, anything more than 120 years, because you only live to be 120 maximum, and then you're dead. And then your grandkids or great-grandkids, they don't even know who you were. They only hear about who you were, maybe. And that's they're only going to hear the good things, right? About, Papa Adolf. They're only going to hear the good things. So I don't buy that it's just the government that's the problem over there. It's absolutely the people, because if the nation was much older, established, it doesn't take away from the fucked up things that happened. If they were much older, if they were a couple, 200-300 years old that happened then, and this was going on now, I could say, okay, it's 100% the government. The problem is the perpetrators of that violence 80 years ago, some of them are still in power today. Some of them are still pulling the strings of the people who are in power today, like Bibi Netanyahu. Some of the rabbis over there that are very pro-national, racist to their core. Yes, racist Jews, that can be a thing and is very much a thing. Look what happens to Christians that go over there. They get spat on and hit and struck and cursed at, and yeah. You don't want to be a Christian woman and go over to Israel. You're not gonna have a good experience. You're not gonna go over there and convert any of them. I can tell you that right now, because they're very staunchly Talmudic. The Talmud, by the way, being the book that supports 8 different genders and says that Christ is boiling in hell and excrement and semen. Yeah, that Talmud, that book, those Jews. So this whole idea of the Judeo-Christian, there is no Judeo-Christian. That's like saying Satano-Christian. That doesn't, those two things are mutually exclusive. They don't exist. There are Christians, there are Jews. We are not the same. Christianity sprang out of Abrahamic religions, not necessarily Judaism, but some of the old Judaic teachings. We took some of the best of it and left out all the pedophilia and the weird gender things and the warmongering and justifying slaughtering nations for God and, all that stuff. And by the way, there's like 5, I think, that I know of. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are directly from their Torah. Christians out there, you might want to do a little research. The New Testament is where it's at. Christ is where it's at. That Old Testament, you got to kind of look at that with a little grain of salt and go, maybe it's not okay to slaughter women and children in the name of God. Maybe that's the true taking God's name in vain. Maybe that's what that really means, not to just say goddamn. I don't really think God gives a shit if you say GD. I think he gives a shit if you kill children and women in his name. If you slaughter entire villages in his name, I believe that's taking God's name in vain. That's the real big no-no. Yeah, fight me on it. I don't give a shit. Leinenkugel, Summer Shandy. Casey gave a shit. It's tasty. It's my summer beer. Tastes like honey and citrus and wonderful. It keeps me somewhat sane while I can still afford it. For now. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up before I start getting ranty and weird and my thoughts start trailing off and whatever. And I might try to make another video later on. Might try to splice some things into this video, some clips, to kind of validate what I'm talking about. But I guess what I want to close this with is that the ghosts of Gaza are rising from the grave and they're coming for Israel. And they have no one to blame but themselves. No one to blame. And if they don't want to be a part of it, they're more than welcome to join Christianity, leave Israel, leave their Jewishness behind, renounce their faith of violence and pedophilia and hate and bigotry and racism, renounce all that shit and find a religion of peace and get the hell out of that war-torn nation that they don't belong in anyway, because their grandparents came over there and kicked out a whole bunch of Palestinians, left them in the desert to die, and then kept pushing them further and bombing them and killing them and raping them and murdering, and just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And now the Gazans are almost gone. They're almost an extinct nation, thanks to Israel. That is a genocide. That is the definition of a genocide, to go in and kill everyone. And it's like, well, a lot of them died of starvation and malnutrition and dehydration. And it's like, yeah, that's because they kept any food trucks from getting in and bombed the fuck out of the water reserves. You're still killing those people. Just because you didn't drive a missile directly up their ass doesn't mean you didn't kill them. You killed them. You killed them all. And you're responsible for that. Not just the government, the people of Israel, the European Jews that are living occupied Israel. You are responsible. Now, the people at the top of your government, they're most responsible. But you're all responsible. Get the fuck out of there. Get out of there. Give up that fucking, that worthless faith that you believe in. That old echoes of savages, of pedophiles, of warlord, ancient fucking cavemen warlords, essentially, is what your doctrine you're still continuing to follow as a Jew. Get the fuck out of that shit. Get away. Because you're following Satan, whether you realize it or not. Your messenger of God, as you call them. That's what they call Satan, the messenger of God. Christians out there, look up what I'm telling you. It's true. They don't talk about it a whole lot because they're not real proud of it. They know they're wrong. That's the thing. It's like whenever a kid like breaks a vase or something and they sweep it up real quick and try to get rid of it. They don't want to talk about it. Where'd that vase go? Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. That's not my book. That's not what that really means. That's not an accurate representation of what's being said. That's what they'll say. Bullshit. Says it word for word that Christ is boiling in hell in excrement and semen, along with his mother, I believe. That's what that says. And they support 8 different genders. Where do you think that shit came from over here? Suddenly just popped off out of nowhere. That's the same thing that Hitler didn't want in Germany. He was burning a whole lot of pornography. The books that he was burning in Germany were pornography and LGBTQ bullshit and the transgender shit. One of the first buildings they took out was the Weimar College of Transgender Sciences there in the 1930s in Germany, Weimar, Germany. That's where that shit comes from. That's where America is having the problem now. We are getting occupied. We are occupied. We need to wake up. We're in a lot of fucking trouble. And that's why. There is a certain foreign nation that is crying about Holocaust while at the same time destroying us. Wake up. Wake up. Anyway, that's all I got for right now. I'll shout at you later. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all the YouTube things.